And up first, which I'm very excited about, is curriculum and materials adoption process. And Jen Knapp is going to come to the podium and speak to us first. Welcome, Jen.
Good evening, and thank you, President Davidson, members of the board, and fellow administrators. This evening, I am excited to present to you an overview of our curriculum and instructional materials adoption process. Over the past several years, in order to best prepare our students and teachers for the new assessments, our traditional curriculum and adoption cycle was revised to adjust to this transition of the new standards. Now that we have fully implemented those grade levels that are assessed or leading up to being assessed, we have had the opportunity to take a step back to clearly articulate our process and how we want to work moving forward. This document outlines the expectations and procedures regarding each phase of the process and provides structure to ensure that it is a collaborative process with large stakeholder involvement. This is an essential component to increase communication and transparency in the local curriculum our teachers develop, the variety of courses we offer, and the materials determined to best meet the needs of all of our learners to promote student-centered learning. The adoption process includes 4 phases. Phase 1 focuses on writing the local curriculum. This begins by reviewing student data to define areas of need, as well as to review and align with the standards approved by the Ohio Department of Education. This collaborative process involves teacher meetings throughout the course of the phase to design the evidence-based curriculum around the model components with feedback from parents and other community members. The goal of Phase 2 is to select materials that support the written curriculum and meet the needs of all of our learners. Teacher committees will review student data and pilot materials throughout the phase to best determine what meets the needs of our community of learners. In Phase 3, 100% of teachers will implement the new curriculum and materials. Professional development will be provided throughout all phases to ensure teachers understand the curriculum and can effectively implement the course of study using the materials that support the course. The criteria established to support implementation will continue to be monitored and assessed to determine the level of success. In Phase 4, monitoring and adjusting begins after the written curriculum and materials have been implemented. In this phase, both will continue to be evaluated for effective implementation, with adjustments and revisions being made as needed. So you see the different colors here. We have yellow and orange and green and blue. It's going to get really busy here in a second, because this shows you where so the first column kind of does the 1, 2, 3, and 4 again, just to guide you. Then we have all of our content areas listed. We did break them for the most part between K-5 and 6-12. Sometimes you'll see the same thing happening in K-12, sometimes you won't. So what we did last year is we took a close examination of kind of where we were and then where we wanted to be moving forward over the course of the next several years. So if you look at the 15-16 school year, which is the second one identified over as a year, I know it's kind of small on there, I know you have your own copy. You can see K-12 guidance, which is about halfway down. It's yellow. This year, the guidance counselor staff is working on writing the curriculum. Next year, they move to orange, and that's when they'll be selecting resources to support that curriculum. The year after that, they move into implementation and subsequently move into blue, which would be monitoring and making modest adjustments. A different one to look at would be right now in K-5 science. We're in the monitoring and implementing. So that provides stability for those grade levels in that content area. And we'll make minor tweaks as we collect feedback. You know, we've gotten some data back from the state just recently, so we'll use that to make some tweaks. And then that is on for the 2019-2020 school year to rewrite that curriculum. Do you have any questions on this right now before I move on? Or do you want to wait until the end? Keep going? Okay. So this shows the components of our model curriculum. And the purpose of our model curriculum is to align our courses of study both vertically and horizontally and to establish the key components that are necessary to support student learning. In the documents, I added examples from fourth grade social studies. It talks about the U.S. Constitution and the First Amendment. And so what I have done is just to give an example of what the content standard would be, what an essential question would be, so that our community can clearly understand how that kind of all aligns together. There are a few that I would like to highlight, the first being assessments. This includes both formative assessments, formative done along the way to inform instruction, as well as summative. Summatives are like quizzes and tests, formative being exit and entrance slips, learning logs, things like that. So these components offer our teachers consistent data points to reflect upon and share ideas that have proven effective in their classrooms. Another component is the consideration for intervention and acceleration. As part of each adoption process, student data will be evaluated to determine the best curriculum and materials for Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 instruction. So Tier 1 is that great first level of instruction that all of our students will receive. Tier 2 is slightly modified, additional differentiation. Tier 3 is even more so, and I can explain that in more detail if you'd like. And I think one of the things that we've really been intentional about with this is to make sure we're considering every child. It seems sometimes we kind of write the curriculum and then we realize it doesn't work for kids and then we're trying to fix it. So it's really getting in front of that and making sure we're looking at all of the data points and all of our learners so we have that from the beginning. The last component I would like to highlight is our consideration for cultural relevancy, inclusivity, and diversity, which will provide us the opportunity to incorporate the histories, texts, values, beliefs, and perspectives of people from different cultural backgrounds as necessary to promote meeting the needs of all of our learners. The next one I have are the roles and responsibilities. Here's you guys. The Board of Education is responsible for the approval of all curriculum, courses of study, textbooks, and instructional materials per board policy. The board reviews any proposed changes and provides feedback prior to approval. We will be having courses of study at the December 14th meeting to look at for high school as we are approaching registration for next year, if you can believe that. Next is administrators. The Office of Curriculum and Instruction, which is part of the Department of Academic Affairs, collaboratively leads this process. Principals select the teachers to serve on the committees, and they participate in professional development that best supports their role. Principals provide input during each phase of the process, and selected administrators also serve on Curriculum Council. And Curriculum Council we have at the district, high school, middle school, and elementary levels. They meet throughout the year to discuss the progress of the relevant proposed changes or the implementation of the written curriculum and/or instructional materials. They make recommendations to the superintendent for any changes, additions, or deletions that are requested to be made to any pre-K to 12 curriculum or curricular materials. Our teachers are at the heart of the curriculum and instruction process, materials adoption process. Principals select teachers at the building level to be part of teacher committees, to collaboratively write the course of study in Phase 1, and to select materials in Phase 2. In addition, they are surveyed throughout each phase of the process and provide input, including the needs of the students, the district's preparedness for implementation, and feedback on the process, as well as to participate in professional development. During Phase 2, selecting materials, teachers pilot materials being considered for adoption. Teachers that serve as instructional coaches and department facilitators provide additional feedback and help lead professional development. Selected teachers also serve on this Curriculum Council, so that Curriculum Council is 50% administrators, 50% WEA members. Parents and other community members have the opportunity to provide feedback on the written curriculum and the materials that support the courses of study during the first and second phase, respectively. Parents are surveyed during the third and fourth phases to gather feedback on the effectiveness of implementation. And I will say that we called the Westerville Library today to secure a spot for December 15th through January 5th for the courses of study to be displayed. And then we'll have an online survey available to gather that feedback. And in closing, our goal in putting this together is to support what we in the Curriculum and Instruction Office fondly refer to as our bumper sticker. I actually have a bumper sticker. It's hanging in my office. I gave one to John. Actually, I put one on his car, which is to provide teachers and students the best curriculum, instructional materials, and professional development necessary to support student-centered learning. So that's what it's all about. How can we design this process to improve student achievement and student learning? And next, I'll open it up to questions. And if you want me to flip back to any slide, just let me know.
So Jen, so the public hears, the board got a copy of the whole process manual, which is about 30-something pages long.
Yes.
And our intent as we come through this, and you've had a chance to scrutinize and ask questions, and we like what it is, at some point, not only that be driving the internal process, but that'll be made public for people in the community to see what our process is and timelines, et cetera. So she's put a lot of work in this, a lot of thought, and I appreciate it because I think she's put together a pretty nice document. So with that, I'll let you ask questions.
Nancy, do you want to go first since this is your liaison position?
Sure. I don't actually have questions because Jen and I have spent a fair amount of time talking about this, and I wanted to say how much I appreciate the amount of time repeatedly that Jen spent talking with me, and we spent going through this and wrestling with issues and talking about things. I want to point out a couple of things. This is a heck of a lot of work, as John said, and you've really put, you being all of the staff that have been engaged, put a mountain of work into it. I'm very pleased with it for a couple of reasons. One is because what we have with this particular adoption process or curricular process, we have an arc of process, if you will. Unfortunately, over the last few years, because of the state's requirements and the rapid change that the state required from us, we didn't always have that kind of arc that we want to have, which is development and implementation and feedback and tweaking, and continuing that arc always, and maintaining the sections for tweaking as we go along. Thank goodness we are hopefully past that for a while, so we can get back. I was telling Jen the other day, it's kind of like Back to the Future, only it's a better future in some ways, because what we tried to do in this district for many years was to have that curricular arc, and we kind of got away from that because we had to. Now we're going back to the arc, and the good thing is this is a highly transparent process now. There is significant opportunity for feedback, significant opportunity for engagement around the curricular process. That's exciting. I'm really glad to see it. It's also very reassuring, and I think as people within the community take a look at it, they also will be reassured about our curricular process. Very, very strong, appropriate, continuing focus on teacher voice in this particular process, which is great, and it is exactly as it should be. And it also, if you'll notice, addresses some of the issues that we asked questions about over time. Where is the alignment, the vertical, the horizontal? Where are those aligned pieces? How do these lay out? How does it all play? Where is the consistency across the process? Where is the consistency in the reported model? That's all taken care of in this model. And I want to thank you, Jen, for working so hard on it, all of the people who worked with you on developing this, and tell you how much I am looking forward to the full implementation of it.
Me too, thank you.
Yes, I too want to say that I can tell it's a lot of work, and you did spend a great deal of thought and have it well organized. I'm appreciative of that. The only question I have, and maybe concern, is the Curriculum Council. That is always a concern. You say it's 50% administrators and 50% WEA or teachers, I assume.
Yes.
So is there plans that those people will rotate or change periodically? And if so, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, every year, and it's been in collaboration with Dr. Kellogg and Mr. Reeves and Mrs. Wallace at the secondary and elementary level, respectively. We select members to be part of that team from the administration side, and then President Rhonda Gilpin selects people. And usually what we try to do at the elementary is to have one person per grade level, and then have some specialties in there. At the secondary level, at middle school and high school, common practice has been to have one person from every department represented, and then we have an equal number. So as Rhonda can probably attest, those change from year to year. It's just based on availability. Some members have served for quite a long time, but again, that's kind of really how the process
That's the reason I
works.
ask, because I understood from several teachers that the same people were on those committees, and so I'm hoping that as time goes on, you will have the opportunity for different teachers to participate in it, even though they may be outspoken or have other suggestions of improvement. And I think sometimes the teachers that may not go along with a certain type of way we're teaching curriculum kind of get pushed aside and left off. And I hope that doesn't happen, because we need their input also. So that's the reason I asked the question. So,
Thank you.
yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem.
This is a really good process, it seems to me. And so, I say it that way because this is kind of a new, I'm learning this process. I even, the curriculum and materials adoption process, I even nicknamed it
Oh,
CMAP.
CMAP.
Yep.
There you go. An acronym. We've been waiting
Because
for an
in
acronym.
education, we have, yes, nothing but, no, not CPAP,
Well, it's very,
CMAP.
yes, it does say a lot to say. There's
Yes, I know.
There's a lot of,
We have a lot of
yes.
acronyms.
So let me bring it back here.
Okay.
Sorry. I, in outlining the purpose of this process, I read through this document a couple of times, and I really am just really pleased with what it seems like to me, a lot of work and effort from you and your team. From Nancy and her liaison position, I know has a great deal of interest and
support.
insight. And then I think Nancy's right, that it seems like it has responded to some of our questions. When I was first introduced to this, I'm going to a specific area. When I was first introduced to this, we were in a leadership, executive leadership session. And went through all of this, and I asked a very simple question. I said, well, isn't this the way everybody does it? And our superintendent, being somewhat politically correct, said, well, maybe they should, but they don't always do it that way. If you would go back to the colored, the multicolored,
Yes, very colorful.
to really look at the process of curriculum adoption and to see that and how, let's say, complicated it can appear. I would urge people to go back to the critical characteristics, or what you call them.
The model components, perhaps?
Analysis of student data. So we are first looking at the data and what's going on. Then we are involving school and community stakeholders. Then the professionals, teachers, and I would love to see a variety of voices, then they begin the collaborative process, because they've already looked at the data and already talked to the stakeholders. And then systematic professional development. Listen, I'm not beating this horse just to speak. I'm suggesting that this has become a really good process that I would echo. I'm excited to see this teased out over the next several years. And the fact that we can always have our eyes on the goal of student excellence, staff support, and developing this district to its fullest potential. And it seems to me that in a very thorough way, I think you and your team have laid out a roadmap that can help us arrive there with looking at data and getting significant input from all the stakeholders.
Thank you.
I'm going to, bear with me, I'm going to repeat a little bit about what he said. I made some notes when I was reading through this. The first thing I noticed was analysis of student data, which he keeps talking about. But the next thing, the local written curriculum that our teachers develop based on state standards, which is something up here we've talked about for the 2 years I've been on. So you've listened, and I appreciate that. The other thing that really stood out was best meets the needs of all of our learners to promote student-centered learning. I love that, all of them. And I think a lot of times we mean well, or people mean well, and we don't think about everyone in the room. We just think about the majority. So I appreciate that very much. And also when I was going through this, I kept thinking, if we did this, and since I've been on board, not a month goes by when I don't hear about our math curriculum at the high school. You know, would we hear about it now? You know, I wish we would have had something like that when that curriculum was adopted. So that's a beautiful thing. Give us one example of how you are going to, the metrics for measuring the successful implementation. And I know the feedback from the parents and the teachers, but what's another way? And
So successful implementation would be looking at any common assessments that we have that are locally derived. Either those are common formative assessments, common summative assessments. I also think teacher feedback, surveys on how well they are comfortable implementing it. I think that's a big key. We're doing some surveying of our K-5 mathematics teachers right now and how they feel about the curriculum, how it's being used, how they feel that it's supporting students. We're also working to develop look-fors to assist the principals so that they understand in a pretty high-level way what they should be seeing to know that the curriculum is being implemented, and so that they can work with their teachers, department facilitators, and instructional coaches to make sure that that happens. So I do think those two groups of teachers, having been implemented in full force this year, will definitely support that work being able to happen. So thank you for that.
so at all three high schools then, they will be taking the same test?
Right now, in certain content areas, and we're growing that aspect of it, what's great about this document is it puts those assessments a little bit more at the forefront. But we have several common assessments specifically in mathematics at the semester and at the end of the year when students take their final exams. And that's honestly last year in February, some of the best professional development that our teachers talked about having was the ability to have something common to say what's working and what's not working. And, well, this is what I did to help my students be successful in learning slope, and this is what worked when my students were learning something else. So it really bridged that conversation to be able to, and it's their own developed assessments. They put it together based on the standards, and to have that dialogue was extremely rich and definitely helped them to revise and improve. So do we have common assessments everywhere? No, we don't. That's something that we are working toward incrementally, and then what best makes sense in the eyes of the curriculum. Is it after a unit? Is it, how is, and that it looks a little bit different in every content area based on what the content is.
Can I jump in on this one a little bit? So it's not an uncommon problem for a large school district to run into the simple implementation errors, which is you bring in a handful of teachers to work on the written curriculum, and everybody else's exposure to that is either through maybe some professional development that maybe they get to, or maybe they're required to be at, that provides them maybe some understanding of the revised written curriculum. And then they're handed this blueprint for teaching. This is the content and the standards, and go off the room to teach. And the degree to which they feel confident in their understanding of the revised curriculum is something we never measure. So you've now implemented a written curriculum without a good understanding of how well prepared the teacher said they felt about their understanding of that new curriculum and the instructional implications for how you now teach that, okay? Second would be with materials, same thing happens. A small group of teachers may be involved in the direct identification of which materials we adopt. Everybody might get a chance to see them. There may be some PD, and it rolls out the same way, but we never measure, hey, after all the PD, you feel really confident and ready to use these materials. And you could take the math example. A lot of misunderstanding on that math curriculum, group tests. A lot of misunderstanding of what those adopted materials say about group tests. And so that implementation goes sideways because you never measured. Were you ready? All right? And so those are simple measurements, even before we get to, because then at the end, then we look at our student achievement results, we go, well, it's not working. Not enough kids are passing. The simplest thing may have to do with our ability to make sure our teachers understood the written curriculum well enough and the standards and the implications for instruction, and whether or not they felt confident with the materials we handed them, and whether or not they were able to do what we were expecting of them. And now you're in a system where not only do you have accountability at the district level and building level and kid level, but you got teacher evaluation 50% tied to student growth measures. And so we want to make sure, real sure, data sure, that teachers feel like I've got exposed to it, I understand it, I'm ready to go, and I feel like I get the right materials. And then if it's not going right, how do we reboot or change, and figuring out not just it's not going right, but what's not going right? You know, and I can go back to the math example again. I can go specifically to group tests. And if you look at what those materials say is, they say, hey, group tests can work effectively. Here's the ways you should do them. By the way, if they don't work for you as a teacher, don't do them. And somewhere in there, we got the message fouled around. I don't blame anybody other than poor process. And I think that's what Jen and her team are trying to address, is looking at those examples. The other thing she said that was really resonates with me was this piece about, she mentioned administrators, specifically principal training. If you don't know what it's supposed to look like, how in the world do you go in and support a teacher? And I'm not even talking about from the evaluation side, but just to help us say, hey, this is going well. So let's take a very specific type of classroom, and that curriculum is up there. Let's take ESL, a very specific curriculum with very specific materials and very specific instructional practices. If you send an administrator into someone's classroom to say, go observe this classroom, which is built around sheltered and our SIOP model and these materials, and we've sent someone in who doesn't know what that's supposed to look like, how in the world can they provide feedback and good instructional leaders for us in the system if they don't know? And I don't know that we've emphasized that principal training component enough, at least in my experiences. And I think this model that Jen and her team have laid out has thought about that piece. And we talk to our principals a lot about this. I say, how are you possibly able to go in that classroom and tell us that the right things are going on if you don't know what it's supposed to look like? And that's the function of instructional leader. And so the process is creating those opportunities for people to do those things. So those are some thoughts on that, the implementation piece that I think are really critical. And when Mr. Villardo asked me that question about other people doing it this way, I will say, oftentimes traditional 5-year cycles like this and teacher involvement like that. But I think we've put some Westerville pieces to this that strengthen a little bit around this. The Tier 2, Tier 3 she mentioned, we don't traditionally look that way. We say, well, we're going to adopt Algebra 1 materials, and we adopt Algebra 1 materials. And what we adopt and write are for regular classroom instruction. And we don't think about, well, for the last 5 years, we've had this percentage of kids not being successful in Algebra 1. What do we got for teachers for them? So what we do to teachers is say, hey, differentiated instruction. They go, hey, I want to differentiate instruction. How and with what? And we don't provide them the infrastructure. So writing the curriculum with that component in place, materials with that component in place, makes the work of a classroom teacher a little bit different, a little bit more functional. So just some of my thoughts. I was also going to ask Jen, if you wouldn't mind, could you, if it's okay, I was going to ask you to talk a little bit about digital curriculum and how it plays into this, because that's That's becoming the interesting field.
That is becoming a very interesting field because there are a number of ways that digital curriculum can be part of the classroom. We have Apex courses, and that is the entire course. We also have things like Dreambox or 10 Marks that are to support students practicing those, in this particular, those mathematical concepts. We also have STAR Early Literacy and STAR Renaissance that support, those are benchmarks. So students will take those 3 times during the school year, teachers will get the data, and make instructional decisions on that. So what's interesting is the pace, as we've learned, of digital curriculum, how that changes what the classroom can look like, opportunities for student engagement. I think now that we're 2/3 of the way into, or 3/4 of the way into our transition to 2-to-1, we're definitely seeing the benefits and student engagement using those components. But I think it will definitely modify what supports our teachers have and their ability to differentiate. If you put a test on Schoology and it can be graded very quickly and you can make decisions off of that, and while it takes a little bit of time to load in, you're not spending hours assessing, you're spending hours well, maybe not hours, but you're spending time on, now that I have that data, what am I going to do with it? Now that I know students are missing this piece or they've really gotten that piece, now I can design my instruction. And it will never replace a teacher, but I think it truly can make a teacher more effective so that they can be doing what they love, which is helping students learn. So that's a really powerful piece.
One practical question. I thought of this afterwards, and I too love the idea of the tier 1, 2, 3, and I was learning about that, and I think that picks up on Tracy's her excitement and all of our excitement about touching the lives of all the children, not just trying to hit the big middle, and then saying, well, okay, figure out how to deal with them, but right?
Right.
Because I was one of them. I was not that engaged in school. And okay, not going to say any more about that. My question is, can you give kind of just a practical, you said that you had just arranged some time at the library for some, I think it was high school?
Courses of study,
Yeah,
yes.
can, practically, just tell us, okay, how's that going to happen? How are we going to get the word out for people, and what is going to happen in that room or that setting?
And what we will do is we'll work with our communications department, and Lynn Mislowski, she'll put out a news release. We have a button that goes on our front website, down kind of where it says enroll and A+ awards, that little area. And so that will give people information on where, so a couple things. We'll put all of the courses of study online for people to view. So you don't have to go to the library if you don't want to, but I'm still fairly traditional. I want to print it out and look physically and touch it. So we'll have all of the courses of study online, and how we set it up last year, people could select, oh, I'm going to look at the business, or I'm going to look at science. They could look at all of it. It just was up to them. But we'll also have hard copies of the courses of study. And I believe it was just displaying on a table, sign, maybe we can borrow that, to say it's Westerville City Schools, these, draft all over it, just to say that this was reviewed for a first reading on December 14th. It will be back, I'm not sure when the first meeting in January will be, but it would probably be at that first January meeting, so we would be collecting data. Something that we'll be doing that we learned because we did this for the first time last year is to provide kind of a cover sheet to help guide people as to what they are looking at. As I remember sharing, some of the feedback that we got was, this is very these are teacher words. These aren't helping me to understand if I want my child to be enrolled in this class or not. So looking at it through that lens by providing kind of a cover sheet with some more detailed explanation to help them navigate the document a little bit more. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Perfect, thank you.
And that is very effective. I happened to walk by one and parents stopped and said,
good.
what's this? Oh, this is great, and they started looking through it. So
Wonderful.
and I don't think they knew it was there. It was just by accident that they happened to be at the library. So that was great.
It's really good stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.